Well. We are kicking off a new series. We are talking about something that is, I think, profoundly important in the times that we live in. And what we want to do here, as much as possible in a spiritual community that teaches practical spirituality, is to take these teachings and apply them right in the very crucible of our own life, so that they don't sit up on the shelf somewhere as some sort of, there's Sunday and I go to church on Sunday, yeah, but then on Monday I'm in the world, I'm back to work, right? Whereas where the implications are is that spirituality is just something that you enjoy and you indulge in when you're sitting on your meditation mat or something, and you're in some form of intentional prayer to connect with the divine, and then it's like, now, get real. I got to get back to work. I got to deal with. I got bills to pay, and I've got, people to deal with, and cars to fix, and blah blah blah. So, unity prides itself on being particularly a practical spirituality, and so it's not that big of a leap. But what unity is not really necessarily prided itself on, or at least it hasn't been the reach of its ministerial. The extent of its ministerial intention was to go beyond the notion of spirituality being an inward experience, and then applied to one's personal life, and not to speak about what's going on in the world vis-a-vis the spiritual understanding that we have here. And that's changed. That is the doors to the idea of understanding how spiritual principles can impact the world that we live in a way that can be actually useful to improving, humanity's plight on this planet, is now being embraced by the new leadership of Unity worldwide headquarters. There's two CEOs, and both of them have been there just a few years, and they're both very progressive-minded. And so Unity now is taking a wider approach to messaging, which will include talking about issues that are going on in the world, not in a polarizing way or a political way where we're going to take a position in opposed or against anything, but we're going to say, how do our spiritual understandings inform how we see what would be a beneficent presence to what's going on in the world? What understanding would inform what would benefit mankind from our deepest and our highest understanding of the truth? Not from an agenda, not from a position, but from an awareness. So this is a very nuanced kind of spiritual activism, you might call it, right? So next week, I didn't bring it with me today, and I wasn't prepared with the other parts of this announcement, but I'm going to read the climate change statement that Unity just put out by Unity World Headquarters. And I'm going to talk to you about a program that we can decide, if people want to champion it here, it's about ecology and becoming a green community. So there will be a connection between those two. So, yeah. So it's like from inside out. We don't start with our ego and think, what's wrong with this country? We know that one, right? We're not going to go ranting and raving around the internet and deciding who's wrong and who's right. What we'll do, which we're doing when we're in our right heart and our right mind, is we listen to this voice of spirit, however that is felt, and we know that to be a sense of wholeness. Remember, in our series for 7 weeks we were saying nobody, nothing is against us. So we're not going to leave that behind and go, the Paris Climate Agreement, that seems to be against us, and that politician's against. No, we're not going there. We're saying nobody and nothing is against us. And so when I come from that place of knowing I'm whole and I'm complete, and we have that sense, then we say, so what is right action? How does that arise from this knowing of wholeness? How can I contribute to this? How can I extend wholeness in the world? How can I extend peace in the world? How can I extend love in the world? And that's not polarizing. That's not me over here and someone else over here. Jesus was a good demonstrator of that. I mean, he spoke the truth, and sometimes that rattled the cages, obviously, of the prevailing ego-dominating positions of the time. But he wasn't against them. He was for the truth, and he raised it up. So we trust here that if we can do that, we can raise up these teachings and realize them and express them in a way that's healthy and non-conflicted way, then we can maybe ameliorate some of the frustration that some of us feel when we are seeing things in the world that, sort of irritate our sensibilities, you might say. But we want to be truly helpful. We want to be truly helpful. We don't want to become one more position that polarizes us in opposition to some other position. Does that make any sense at all? I'm trying to say it in a way that is a clarification of what we're about, or how we're going to be about that. So you'll hear that here, but that doesn't mean that we're going to become political champions for particular causes. We're going to bring up what would love do. That might be a way we would say it. What would love do here, right? What would wholeness do? How do we treat the planet when we understand that we are one with this life? There's one life. Okay. So, saying that is an introduction to sort of the why of how I'm taking on this new series, because it will have powerful global implications, as well as being, as we always are here, interested in our own spiritual understanding and our spiritual awakening. Yes? So what we're here for is to never forget that our first assignment is to wake up, spiritually wake up, is to understand, have our own realization of the divine as being right here and right now. Even though there'll be many times when you'll be thinking of your brother-in-law or some friend that you have that really needs to wake up, But when we start with that, it's always doomed for a problem. It's going to get us in trouble. And because it's not about what somebody else needs to do, right? It's about what we need to do. It's about what we need to do. So we're going to stay true to this idea that spirituality is an inside job, but it's going to have external repercussions. There's going to be the offshoot of our realizations are going to impact the way we show up in the world. Does that make sense? Yes. So it's not like we're going out to we're going to fix the world or save the world. We're not going to come at it from that place. We're not going to fix ourselves either. We're going to awaken to who we are, and with that understanding, which is more rooted in wholeness and self-worth and love and a peace, then how I show up in the world is going to be a reflection of that. And that's going to flavor and it's going to guide me in a way that will manifest more of that in the world. Not because I'm trying to change anybody, but because I'm trying to be aligned with the one. Yes? Okay. I'm going to read from the book. The book is called Birthing a Greater Reality, A Guide to Conscious Evolution. And it's by Robert Brummett, who is one of Unity's, I think maybe Unity's most erudite, smartest Unity author. And he comes from a very non-dual spiritual perspective. I really admire his work. He was my pastoral studies professor when I was in seminary. And he was having us read books from Ken Wilber and Up from Eden and things like that, and talking about transpersonal psychology and shadow work and all that cool stuff, and highly influenced me. So anyway, Robert Brummett wrote this book. They didn't come in this week. They were supposed to be here by Friday. We'll have copies in the office beginning probably Tuesday of this week if you'd like to get a copy. We'll be with this book for about 5 weeks, and so there will be an opportunity for you to read through the book with us if you want to. You don't have to. Okay, so this is, today is going to be, besides what I just did off the cuff, this is going to be a little heady stuff, because we have to cover 14 billion years of evolution in, about 15 minutes now. So we are believers, yes? So with God, all things are possible. Let me begin by reading this, because it is a succinct encapsulation of this story, this 14 billion year story. So here we go. The Big Bang occurred nearly 14 billion years ago. And about 10 billion years after the Big Bang, you, the living soul of humanity, were born into physical form. You may not remember that. You were born on a small planet circling a fairly large average star located somewhere near the edge of a spiral galaxy. There were more than 100 billion such stars in this galaxy, and over 100 billion such galaxies in the universe at that time. This planet, now named Earth, formed more than 4 billion years ago, but it was less than 1 billion years old upon your arrival. Your beginnings were indeed humble. A few protein molecules decided to get together and to make something of themselves. And voila, you were born. For more than 2 billion years, you were just a single-celled creature. Talk about underachieving, huh? I mean, 2 billion years, single-celled creature. But then you discovered sex. And then things got really interesting. No, it doesn't say that. Things really took off. That's what it says here. Just a billion years later, you developed a backbone. And only 300 million years after that, you were feeding milk to your babies. About 2 million years ago, you found yourself in your present form, a hairless primate. I'm sorry. It wasn't funny at the first service. It's still not funny. I'm just laughing. A hairless primate that learned to walk upright. That's what we do. You learned to use tools and eventually speech. Then about 200,000 years ago, you became Homo sapiens, wise man, one that knows. Then, in the blink of a cosmic eye, you were walking on the moon. You learned language and music and science and poetry and many wonderful things, but more important, you are beginning to discover yourself. About 100,000 years ago, you became Homo sapiens sapiens. Not just wise man, but wise man. You begin to understand that you understand. You know that you know. And you became aware that you were aware, and you began to discover your own wisdom and power and beauty. And now you were starting to discover what you really are. You are beginning to awaken from the dream. Barbara Marx Hubbard, who certainly is the leading voice for conscious evolution, belongs in this series and in this talk, and we'll pull from her from time to time, and I want to read this quote from her. She says, "We are the crossover generation, moving from one phase of evolution to the next. Although barely perceptible, as were the earliest humans in the pre-human world, a young Homo universalis is emerging everywhere, in every culture, faith, and background. And the signs of our emergence as universal humans include unconditional love for the whole of life, a powerful, irresistible passion to unite with spirit within, and a deep, heartfelt impulse to connect with others, and to co-create a world equal to our love and our capacities." Beautiful, yes? And she goes on to say, as we pass through our crises, and we know we have them, we successfully birth ourselves into a more universal humanity. We will emerge capable of co-evolving with nature and co-creating with spirit. We will be able to co-create a new world. And during these transition times, it is so important to stabilize our consciousness as universal humans. And we can do this by engaging in authentic relationships with others of similar intent in a collective field of resonance that can support our conscious evolution by staying awake together. Yes? So this is a beautiful example of what a spiritual community can be, to be in authentic relationship with each other, and to not only be here for our own spiritual awakening, but to be here to help each other stay awake. Because that's the one thing that a spiritual community rises high in its value, is we know that we all fall asleep. And I'm not just talking about at night, but we forget who we are. And someone else who's not triggered in the same way that you're triggered, that causes you to go into your slumber and to go into unconsciousness, can stand with you and remember for you who you are. and be that for you and see that in you and call that back, call you back from the forgetfulness where you've fallen into your let's say your lower nature, your less evolved consciousness. And that's what we can be for each other. And when we hold that as a value here, then it isn't just about I'm coming to get get mine. I'm just coming to grow spiritually, but I'm coming to grow spiritually, but I'm connected to the whole. And so my role here has implications that extend beyond my personal self. And they don't even have to be intentional as long as you're present. And someone will find you. You don't even have to find them. If I'm here and I'm realizing that my sense of well-being and my sense of wholeness and my sense of love is not my personal sense of wholeness and love, but it's the infinite love that for this moment I'm very aware of. I haven't commandeered it and kept it for me. I've just tapped into it. And so I can walk around and I can be an experience of the infinite. And I'm walking around with the experience of the infinite. I guarantee you, other people that are wanting to know that will be drawn to your presence. And then you can be for them what they are most needing in the moment to awaken to who they are. So I love the idea that spiritual community is very intentional. It isn't just willy-nilly, like, we just come together and we have some great music and then we do some talking and then we have some coffee and we all go home. That the infinite field of love and peace is using this community for the evolution of humanity. Yes. And that everyone who steps in here has a much more profound of an opportunity than they may realize. And I'm not in any way patting ourselves on the back for what this is because of who your teacher is or your minister or anything else. It's just because we keep our intentions pure here for spiritual understanding. And we come here and we open our hearts and our minds. It can't help but use us for that purpose. And then we become, what Barbara Marx Hubbard calls that resonant field. And then people walk in and they don't even know what's happened to them. They come in with one sense of themselves and they feel something. I've had people say it over and over again. There's so much love here. Yes? So can you imagine that how important your presence is here? And how your role here becomes something that extends well beyond whatever personal benefit you get from showing up. And really, there is no personal benefit. How can there be personal benefit if we're all one? Right? It's only an illusion of a personal benefit when it's really just like, a wave thinking that it's separate from the ocean or a sunbeam thinking it's separate from the sun. It just appears that way. But who we are is part of the oneness. And the oneness can use us in the context of this place where we gather to remember together, to stay awake together, and to remind each other when we have forgotten. It's a beautiful thing. And when it's working, there's no greater vehicle for what we're about. And when we started spirit groups last year, what we knew was that people could have some experiences coming into this room, but what would be really powerful is if people could get closer together in smaller circles, where people could be face-to-face and heart-to-heart in a much easier way, that it would lend itself to those sort of relationships being made, facilitate those kind of relationships happening. And so we will continue to listen to how Spirit is guiding us to make our deepest mission and purpose here, which is to realize and express our divine nature. How that can happen here most readily. What is ours to do? We take our guidance from what works. And if something doesn't work, then we'll be willing to let it go. And we'll be open to a new idea. And, next week, I'm going to talk about the program for Unity of Santa Barbara becoming more of a green community, and for someone's going to go, that's what I've been waiting for. That's maybe ring somebody's bell, and says, that's how I want to express my divine nature. And we want to do that. And someone came into me a week or so ago and said, I think there's so much power in telling our own story. Telling a story. It can be absolutely, life-changing for someone to get up and tell their story in front of a group of people. And, like something that really changed my life. And so she said, I'd like us to have like an open mic thing where you come and you speak for 3 minutes about a story that changed my life. And I said, would you champion that? Would you organize it? And she said, absolutely. I said, well, that's good, write it up, we'll do it. So what we're interested in is fulfilling our mission. The form, we can be very fluid in the form, as long as it fits within the parameters of our resources and our capacity to support it. So be thinking along those lines, because we are open to being a program ministry, which means it isn't just it's not a one-trick pony thing on Sunday that we do here, right? We're looking for more ways to realize and express our divine nature. And wonderful thing that the UIPA did was a perfect example of taking that impulse of oneness and connection and compassion and bringing forth a program, and that has been done so beautifully. So understanding how this is a mission-centered church and how that arises and how that shows up is how we get to stand back in awe and see how Spirit expresses itself in all of its diversity and within the context of unity. Where was I?
Right on target.
Oh, look at the time. Look at the time. We're almost out of it. But who cares? Time is an illusion. No. All right. I just have to decide what I want to...
Only 5 cups of coffee, right?
That's all. Okay. Let me just go through this summary, because then I'll know that I said something related to the theme. So this is a summary of what is basically the first chapter in this book when we talk about evolution, and when he talks about evolution. So here it is. Each of us is the one dreaming that he or she is an individual personality. The purpose of life is to awaken from that dream, to know ourselves as limited human beings living in a physical universe, and simultaneously, this is the thing, to know ourselves as unlimited and eternal. That's the biggest conundrum that most people have in the spiritual path, is they think, well, what am I? Am I human or am I divine? It's like an either-or thing. It's like, no. You're both. Because if there's only one thing going on, one presence, one power, one reality, there's not two things. There's one presence and one power and one life, and in some moments you are experiencing this wholeness. And you would be experiencing that with or without your body. Yeah? And there's other times when that oneness is expressing itself, and as it's taken this form as a body, and you experience what it means to be fully in a body, to be fully human, to feel. You cut me, I'm going to bleed, it's going to hurt, I'm going to have feelings, I'm going to have sensitivities. I have my 5 senses. It gives me one view of reality. It's not the only view of reality, but it is a view of reality. When I go out and drive today, you'll be glad to know that I'm not meditating and thinking about the fact that space and time don't exist. That would be dangerous. So it's being fully human, being fully in the body, but not ending with that recognition as the fullness of who you are, the allness of who you are. Does that make sense? Yeah. So it's not either or, although sometimes it feels like, well, right now I feel very human, right? Or when you're in the greatest meditation, I don't even know I have a body right now. I am just one with the one, And that's a whole other thing, But then you're back again because the phone rings, like, what? Really? Oh my God. Number 2, the process of this awakening is called evolution or evolution. Which is it? Doesn't matter, does it? Okay. We now find ourselves at a crucial juncture in human history. We have attained godlike powers, but have not developed the wisdom needed to broker these powers. Wow. Our development has become dangerously one-sided. We have achieved an astounding degree of knowledge of the material world, yet we remain appallingly ignorant of what? Ourselves, yeah. We have failed to parallel our external development with growth and self-awareness. The crisis before us is a spiritual crisis. The vast majority of us do not know who or what we truly are. Waking up has become an evolutionary option?
Imperative.
Imperative, yes. Yet something is keeping us asleep. Rather than adapting to the natural world through biological evolution, humans have evolved a brain that gives us the ability to create internal virtual worlds, and we can change these internal maps more quickly than it takes us to evolve biological changes. So, we're going to err on the side of what's easier, right? If we can create internal representations of what we think we would like to have in our reality, rather than waiting for 50 million years for this physical species to evolve so that you can deal with the changes in the environment, we choose to change the environment, right? Okay. Which is actually good, but not so good. We've developed cultures that allow us to pass these strategies on to subsequent generations. When environmental conditions change, we can readily adapt. So the problem is that the human mind, which is designed to help us survive, is no longer our servant. It has become our what? Our master. We have become identified with this mind. We think it is who we really are. Thus, we're not really wanting to abandon it, right? Take leave of your mind just sounds like, a bad thing. But in spiritual terms, it's actually what's necessary. You have to leave the mind. It's like Moses, took the Israelites right to the edge, to the promised land, but he couldn't get them in. He had to turn it over to Aaron, And John the Baptist was the forerunner to Jesus, and John the Baptist was known for his intellect, yeah? And he said, I can't take you any farther. The one who comes after me will be the one. And the one who came after him was Jesus. It was the way of the heart. The intellect can only take us so far. And it's very important that it take us as far as it can go. But when we recognize what our connection is to the infinite, the mind is only capable of understanding the finite. Does that make sense? The mind can only understand the finite. It has no understanding of infinite. A finite mind cannot understand an infinite reality. To understand an infinite reality, we have to go beyond the mind. And that's why, but we have had so much success with the mind. It is, look at all that we've been able to do, send a man on the moon and walk in space and all these great technology things. We so bow to this mind of ours that we have given it unbridled power, as if it is should be at the leading edge of humanity's forward march. And we have seen what it has done when it has lost sight of the infinite, has lost sight of the infinite connections. This has no capacity to understand oneness. It only understands the physical, material, phenomenal reality. And it's the overlooking of the infinite nature of reality that allows us to do things that are not so good to each other and to the planet. So this notion of evolution of consciousness brings us to a recognition that it's not going to be the mind that's going to get better, but it's going to be the consciousness of the whole that is expanded, where we actually become more of an aware of the presence and the power and the love that we talk about in our statement of faith as being the ultimate reality in which we live and move and have our being at all times. And that's what is running the show. That's what's animating our bodies. That's what's responsible for all of life. And that our minds and our bodies need to be in service to that knowing, rather than our doing and our being in service to the mind, because it has a very finite understanding, and it is still rooted in a very age-old, ancient man understanding of survival. And that's why we can do harm, because survival rules over the notion of oneness. Number 5, Rather than adapting to the natural world through biological evolution, humans have evolved a brain that gives us the ability. Oh, I'd read that already. Yes. Number 6, the problem is that the human mind, designed to help us survive, is no longer our servant, has become our master, which I read already. We have become identified with this mind. We think it is who we are. Thus, we are afraid to abandon it. Evolution, here we go, is calling us to awaken. But we have identified with our survival strategies, and we remain asleep. We have mistaken our thoughts of who we are with the reality of who we are. To let go of this identity is very frightening. And that's why most people don't do this work. Because as soon as they come up against, the known territory of their understanding, and they come right to the edge of it, and beyond it is the grand abyss of not knowing, most people go, oh no, I'm going to stay in this little world that I know in. But you know that all breakthroughs of innovation always, are found when people stand at the edge of their resourcefulness, the edge of their knowing. And then they say, beyond is the knowing. And to be willing to be in the chasm of not knowing, because in that place, you are truly receptive. When I'm in knowing, when I understand, oh yeah, I got this all figured out. Oh yeah, done that before, been with her. I know that kind of person. I know this situation, and I know how to respond. When I'm doing that, I'm just recycling the same thing over and over again. And if I'm really trying to evolve my life or my planet, for example, then I need to go right here as far as I need to go, and then trust that the infinite love and life and presence of power of God is going to inform me as I step into not knowing. Even Jesus, in his enlightened state of mind, was baffled by what it felt like. He was standing at the edge of this notion of how his ministry should play out. What do you mean? I've only been doing this for 3 years. I want to stay, I want to stick around. But he didn't realize that there would be a leap, a quantum leap in consciousness if he were to extend beyond this notion that his beingness and his ministry could be contained in a body. That he needed to release that body image and teach everyone on the planet that awakening is not a function of the body or of the mind. It's a function of the spirit. And that sometimes we have to stand at the edge of what we know is possible and go into the unknown, trusting that the spirit that is always with us and in us and through us is going to lift us into the level of knowing that will allow us to go forward to that uncharted ground, which is conscious evolution, which is being conscious to be conscious in the journey of evolution that's happening anyway. Evolution is going to happen anyway. We don't have any choice in it. We don't have any choice. For 14 billion years, were there microbes sitting around going, we've had a vote, we decided no more evolving, It is the infinite, power and presence, whatever you want to call it, that is evolving through us. And we're just one version of many versions of the Spirit taking form. But what we have an opportunity now, because we know that we know, is we can be conscious about this evolution. We can be conscious about this transition, about this making this quantum leap. I can say, I'm in for that, I've listened to the mind long enough. I've listened to the ego long enough. I've kept bouncing up against these obstacles and these old beliefs and these things that I'm not enough and I can't do this and I can't do that. I'm willing to let all that go and see what the next step in this evolution of consciousness is for me. And when more of us are willing to do that, then what's going to happen here is the old structures that are the ones that have kept in place some very anti-human sort of systems are going to begin to collapse, because there won't be as many people holding them up anymore as people realize that those are in the way of God. And we want to be the way of God. Yes? Namaste. Not for today.